Hey, you want to know what happens when the most prestigious academy in the galaxy accepts its first human student? Let me tell you, because as Ambassador Krex Brightscale of the Centauri Empire, I had a front row seat to the most bizarre spectacle in the history of the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences. Picture our magnificent crystal spires piercing the purple skies of Centauri Prime, where 10,000 species gathered to push the boundaries of science and technology. Our quantum-powered halls sparkle with endless possibility, every corridor humming with the combined brilliance of the galaxy's finest minds. And then there was Marcus Phoenix. The day he arrived, I almost mistook him for a maintenance worker. There he stood, a pathetically small bipedal creature with that weird fur patch humans call hair, completely lacking the natural advantages that make our other students extraordinary. No bioluminescence, no quantum-enhanced neural pathways, not even a basic gravimetric manipulation gland, just 2 arms, 2 legs, and that peculiarly round face with those defenseless eyes. Ambassador Brightscale, he said, approaching my crystalline desk with surprising steadiness. I appreciate the opportunity to study at your esteemed institution. The way he spoke, so formal and composed, made my facial ridges twitch with amusement. Here was this primitive creature, acting as if he belonged among the galaxy's elite. "Welcome to the Academy," I replied, my voice resonating with the perfect diplomatic tone I have mastered over 3 centuries, though I feel compelled to remind you that our standards are unprecedented in their rigor. I may have flexed my iridescent scales just a bit, watching as the light scattered across his awestruck face. That first week was pure entertainment. In our zero-gravity orientation session, while the Lumerian students performed their traditional quantum ballet, Marcus spun around like a malfunctioning drone. During the neural interface training, he actually pulled out a physical writing implement. Can you believe it? A piece of processed plant matter to make marks on processed plant pulp. How absolutely primitive. Ambassador, one of my assistants, whispered during the 3rd day, perhaps we should consider revoking his acceptance. For his own safety, of course. Their concern was almost touching, if completely misplaced. Now, I responded, watching Marcus struggle with the molecular food synthesizer in the grand dining hall. Every species deserves a chance to fail spectacularly. Oh, how those words would come back to haunt me. But at that moment, watching him jabbing helplessly at the neural interface panel while the other students glided past on their quantum-stabilized hover platforms, I truly believed we had made a terrible mistake in accepting a human into our hallowed halls. If only I had known then what that mistake would cost us all. Let me tell you about the day Prince Vazix of the Orion Cluster decided to show everyone just how pathetic our human student really was. Now Vazix, with his crystalline body and quantum-enhanced reflexes, had never tasted failure in his 800 years of existence. So when he spotted Marcus fumbling with the anti-gravity controls during our zero-G combat training, his crystalline form literally sparkled with malicious delight. "Watch this," Ambassador Vazix purred, his voice resonating through the quantum field. With a casual wave of his translucent appendages, he accessed the gravity control matrix. Poor Marcus never saw it coming. One moment, our human student was attempting a basic defensive maneuver. The next, he was spinning through the training chamber like a comet with broken stabilizers. His arms and legs flailed in that ridiculous way only humans can manage, face turning that fascinating shade of green that their species displays when their primitive equilibrium is disturbed. Having trouble adapting to civilized training methods, Marcus Vazix called out, his crystalline form chiming with laughter. "Perhaps you would prefer something more suited to your species. I hear the Earth still uses something called stairs." The entire chamber erupted in a symphony of alien amusement. The Lumerians flashed their bioluminescent patterns in synchronized mockery. The Titan clan members vibrated at their special humor frequency, making the crystal walls resonate. Even the normally stoic Quantum Physics Society members calculated the exact trajectories of Marcus's wild spins and projected them as glowing equations in the air. But that was just the beginning. During combat simulations, Lady Nexara of the Plasma Dominion turned Marcus's training sessions into her personal entertainment show. Her energy-based form danced around his clumsy attacks, shifting between solid and plasma states with artistic grace. "This is what happens when we lower our admission standards," she announced to the gathered crowd, her body pulsing with plasma-bright smugness. Marcus threw another futile punch, his fist passing harmlessly through her midsection. "Look how he relies on physical contact. Absolutely prehistoric. The academic rivalries proved even more brutal. During advanced quantum mathematics, Professor Zelax's 9 brains worked in perfect harmony to humiliate our human student, Mr. Phoenix. All 9 heads spoke in unison, their tentacles writhing with disapproval. Please explain to the class why you insist on solving 11-dimensional equations using 3-dimensional logic. Marcus's attempts to explain were drowned out by the collective groans of his classmates. The hive mind students in the back row actually synchronized their neural patterns just to express their shared disdain more efficiently. Even the simple act of eating became a spectacle. The Quantum Physics Society, led by their insufferably brilliant President Revik Prime, reprogrammed the molecular food synthesizer to recognize Marcus's biosignature. Every time he tried to order food, it would only produce what they called Earth primitive sustenance, namely grass and raw tubers. "We thought you might appreciate a taste of home," Revik Prime announced, his quantum probability field vibrating with poorly contained glee. "This is what your species evolved eating, correct? Before you learned about fire." Through it all, Marcus maintained this frustratingly calm demeanor that even I found provocative. When Vazix caused him to spin uncontrollably, he would eventually right himself and try again. When Lady Nexara humiliated him in combat training, he would study her movements with quiet intensity. When the food synthesizer produced nothing but grass, he would simply nod and chew thoughtfully, as if conducting some sort of primitive taste test. "You handle their attention with surprising grace," I mentioned to him one day, after watching him endure another round of Revik Prime's quantum pranks. "Most species would have fled back to their home worlds by now." Marcus looked at me with those unnervingly steady eyes and said, "Sometimes, Ambassador, the best way to handle a bully is to let them think they have all the power." Then he smiled, and for just a moment, I felt an unfamiliar sensation in my diplomatic glands. Was it unease? Looking back now, I should have paid more attention to that smile. It wasn't the smile of a beaten being, or even a resilient one. No, that was the smile of someone who knew something the rest of us didn't. But we were all too busy laughing at the primitive human to notice that the joke was about to be on us. The first hint that something was not quite what it seemed came during the advanced quantum engineering practical exam. Everyone expected Marcus to fail spectacularly, as usual, but that day something changed. Professor Zelax had assigned us to observe as Marcus attempted to stabilize a pocket quantum singularity, a task that even graduate-level Titan clan students approached with caution. Prince Vazix stood ready with his recording crystals, anticipating another entertaining display of human inadequacy. "Begin the test," Professor Zelax announced through all 9 mouths, their tentacles already writing up what they assumed would be a failing grade. Marcus approached the containment chamber with that same irritating calmness. But instead of fumbling with the controls, his hands moved with unexpected precision. The quantum field responded to his commands as if it were an eager pet. The singularity not only stabilized but began pulsing in perfect harmony with the Academy's power grid. "Impossible," whispered Lady Nexara, her plasma form flickering with confusion. "The neural interface requires at least a level 7 quantum consciousness. Humans barely register at level 2. I noticed something else peculiar that day. When Marcus left the testing chamber, he walked past a section of the corridor that was supposedly undergoing maintenance. The security force field should have stopped him, but it rippled and let him pass as if he had the highest clearance levels. Ambassador Brightscale Revik Prime cornered me later that day, his quantum probability field practically buzzing with conspiracy theories. "I have been analyzing the human's access patterns. Do you realize he has authorization to enter areas of the Academy that even the Board of Regents cannot access?" More strange incidents followed. During another combat simulation, when Lady Nexara attempted her usual plasma state humiliation tactics, Marcus simply smiled and pressed a small device on his wrist. Her form suddenly solidified, leaving her spluttering in shock. "That is proprietary plasma dominion technology," she hissed afterward. "Even our allies do not have access to phase lock generators." The rumors began spreading faster than a quantum virus through the Academy's neural network. Some claimed they saw Marcus talking to the ancient AI in the restricted archives section, discussing topics that would melt most students' neural processors. Others swore they spotted him using what looked like a primitive paper notebook, but when scanned with quantum sensors, the pages contained encryption that even the combined processing power of the Titan clan could not crack. There must be a logical explanation, I said during an emergency meeting with the faculty. Perhaps he simply got lucky with the singularity test. Professor Zelax's 9 heads all rolled their eyes simultaneously. Ambassador, yesterday he accessed the temporal mathematics library. The guard's memory logs show they let him in without question, but none of them can remember why. Even my auxiliary brains cannot make sense of it. The final straw came during the annual Quantum Gala. As Deputy Social Secretary of the Academy, I was responsible for checking everyone's diplomatic credentials. When Marcus presented his ID crystal, my scanner nearly short-circuited. The clearance level was higher than anything I had seen in 3 centuries of diplomatic service. This must be a malfunction, I declared, trying to maintain my composure. Marcus just gave me that insufferable smile again. Is it, Ambassador? Are you absolutely sure about that? Before I could respond, 3 Galactic peace enforcers materialized next to him. I expected them to arrest him for credential forgery. Instead, they bowed. They actually bowed to the human. As Marcus walked away, leaving me standing there with my facial ridges twitching in confusion, I overheard 2 Lumerian students whispering. My quantum perception caught a glimpse of his genetic signature yesterday. You will not believe what I saw. Tell me. It was partly redacted by the highest level of galactic security protocols. The only other time I have seen such protection is. The student never finished their sentence. A sudden burst of static interrupted all electronic communications in that section of the academy, and when it cleared, neither student could remember what they had been discussing. Something very strange was happening at the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences, and for the first time in my diplomatic career, I had absolutely no idea what I was dealing with. It all came to a head during the annual Quantum Combat Championships. Prince Vazix, his crystalline form practically vibrating with accumulated spite, had finally had enough of our mysterious human student. The way Marcus kept surviving every attempt at humiliation had driven the prince to the edge of his considerable sanity. I challenged Marcus Phoenix to a full combat simulation, Vazix announced during breakfast in the Grand Hall. No restrictions, no safety protocols, no holding back. His crystalline body pulsed with dangerous frequencies as he towered over Marcus's table. The entire hall fell silent. Even the quantum field generators seemed to pause their endless humming. Everyone knew that an unrestricted combat simulation was practically a death sentence. The last time someone tried it, they spent 3 cycles in molecular reconstruction. Marcus looked up from his plate of synthesizer-generated grass. Rivik Prime still hadn't fixed that, and said, with that infuriating calmness, I accept. Have you completely lost your primitive mind? I pulled him aside, my facial ridges practically tied in diplomatic knots. Prince Vazix is the undefeated champion of the Orion Cluster. His neural combat reflexes are faster than quantum tunneling. Marcus just smiled. Ambassador, have you ever wondered why humans survive so long without any natural advantages? Before I could point out the obvious flaws in that statement, the Academy's quantum arena was already filling up with spectators. The Lumerians had positioned themselves in the upper tiers, their bioluminescent patterns creating a betting pool visualization in real time. The Titan clan members established a direct neural link to broadcast the event across 17 dimensions. Even Professor Zelax's 9 heads were arguing about the mathematical impossibility of human survival. Prince Vazix entered the arena first, his crystalline form reconfiguring into combat mode. Quantum energy crackled around him as he accessed his full powers. The safety field generators actually started smoking, trying to contain his energy signature. Then Marcus walked in, wearing what looked like primitive Earth workout clothing. No quantum armor, no neural enhancers, not even basic gravitational stabilizers. The crowd could not decide whether to laugh or gasp. Begin announced the combat AI, and everything went completely insane. Vazix launched his first attack, a combination of quantum-enhanced crystal shards and gravitational distortion fields, the kind of attack that had literally torn apart small moons. Marcus should have been reduced to his component atoms. Instead, he moved. No, saying he moved does not do justice to what we witnessed. He flowed through the quantum field like water through crystal lattices. Every deadly shard missed by millimeters. Every gravitational distortion somehow ended up working in his favor. Impossible, Vazix snarled, his crystalline form shifting to pure energy state. No human reflexes are this good. Marcus's response was to pull out what looked like an ancient Earth communications device. With a casual tap, he activated it, and suddenly Vazix's energy form began to destabilize. "You see," Marcus said, "still dodging attacks with unnatural grace, humans had to get clever to survive. We learned to watch, to adapt, to turn our enemies' strengths against them." He pressed another button, and Vazix's quantum field collapsed entirely. The prince, now forced back into physical form, charged forward in blind rage. Marcus sidestepped, and with a move that looked deceptively simple, used Vazix's own momentum to send him crashing into the arena wall. "We learned that the biggest advantage is making others underestimate you," Marcus continued, now standing over the dazed prince. "And we learned that the best technology is not always the newest." The crowd watched in stunned silence as Marcus held up his primitive device. "This phone is running an app I wrote last week, based on my observations of crystalline entity frequencies. Amazing what you can do with a bit of basic coding and careful observation." Prince Vazix tried to rise, his form flickering between crystal and energy states. "Who? What are you?" Marcus knelt down beside him, and in a voice that somehow carried to every corner of the arena, said, "I am exactly what I appear to be. A human who is tired of being bullied." The combat AI announced Marcus as the winner, but nobody was listening. They were all too busy trying to process what they had just witnessed. A human, using nothing but primitive technology and natural agility, had just defeated one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. As Marcus walked out of the arena, I noticed something odd about his phone screen. For just a moment, it displayed what looked like a royal security clearance. But before I could process what that meant, the biggest shock of the day was about to walk through the Academy's main gates. And when I say biggest shock, I mean that quite literally, as the Galactic Queen herself was about to make a very unexpected appearance. The Galactic Queen's arrival was not subtle. When the most powerful being in the known universe decides to visit, subtlety takes a quantum leap out the nearest airlock. First came the temporal guards, their chronosuits bending light and reality around them. Then, the quantum enforcers materialized, their presence alone making the Academy's advanced security systems look like primitive calculator apps. The air itself seemed to bow in submission as Her Majesty's personal flagship, the Star Sovereign, descended from orbit. Ambassador Brightscale, one of the guards, addressed me, their time-shifted voice echoing before and after they spoke. "Her Majesty requests your presence." And the human student. My facial ridges nearly tied themselves into a quantum knot. "Marcus Phoenix? Surely there must be some mistake." The guard's chronometric visor pulsed with what might have been amusement. "No mistake, Ambassador. Though perhaps you should start addressing him as His Royal Highness, Prince Marcus." I am proud to say I maintained my diplomatic composure for exactly 2.3 seconds before my jaw hit the quantum-polished floor. The Queen emerged from her ship like a supernova of authority. Her radiance transcended mere bioluminescence, her presence warped probability itself. Even the Academy's AI systems bowed their processing power in deference. And there, standing beside her with that same insufferable calm smile, was Marcus Phoenix. "Mother," he said, bowing slightly. "I told you that you did not need to come personally." Mother. Mother. The human who had been eating synthesized grass for the past month was the son of the Galactic Queen. The entire Academy had gathered to witness this impossible moment. Prince Vazix's crystalline form had gone completely transparent from shock. Lady Nexara's plasma state was fluctuating so wildly she had to be contained by her handlers. Professor Zilax's 9 heads were all gaping in perfect synchronization. My son the Queen's voice carried both infinite power and maternal amusement. When I receive reports that the heir to the galactic throne is being bullied over synthesized grass, I believe a personal visit is warranted. Rivik Prime, who had been floating nearby on his quantum probability field, suddenly found himself materially existing in several embarrassing alternate dimensions simultaneously. "You see," the Queen continued, addressing the stunned crowd, "we believed it was important for the future ruler of the galaxy to understand all his subjects, even those who might view humans as primitive. Though." She turned to Prince Vazix with a smile that could have frozen a sun. "I trust those views have been appropriately adjusted." The prince's crystal form vibrated with pure terror. "Yes, Your Majesty, absolutely adjusted. Humans are amazing, simply wonderful. I have always said so." The Queen raised one perfect eyebrow. Indeed? Perhaps we should review the security recordings of the past month? I find the quantum arena footage particularly interesting. I watched as every bully, every mocker, every perpetrator of anti-human prejudice suddenly discovered urgent appointments in distant galaxies. Lady Nexara's plasma form practically evaporated in her haste to bow and apologize. The Quantum Physics Society collectively calculated that their best survival probability lay in immediate and profound regret. Ambassador Brightscale, the Queen addressed me. I trust you will ensure my son's remaining time at the Academy is more educational. My diplomatic training kicked in just in time. Of course, Your Majesty. Though I must say, Prince Marcus has already taught us all quite a few lessons. Marcus, still standing there in his primitive Earth clothing, caught my eye and winked. Just winked. At that moment I realized that every stumble, every fumble, every moment of apparent weakness had been carefully calculated. He had played us all like quantum strings, and we had performed exactly as expected. As the Queen prepared to depart, leaving behind a thoroughly humbled academy, I heard Marcus whisper to his mother, "See? I told you humans could handle things differently." The Queen's response was lost in the sound of reality rearranging itself around her departure, but I swear I heard her laugh. The Galactic Queen, the most powerful being in the universe, laughed at a human joke. The galaxy would never be the same. Have you ever watched a quantum crystal restructure itself after a phase shift? That is exactly what happened to the social hierarchy of the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences after the Queen's revelation. The speed at which former bullies transformed into eager sycophants would have impressed even a temporal physicist. Prince Vazix, our previously undefeated champion, now practically genuflected every time Marcus walked past. His crystalline form would shift into its most aesthetically pleasing configuration, attempting to catch even a fraction of the royal attention. "Your Highness," he would stammer, "might I carry your primitive educational materials for you?" The best part? Marcus still insisted on carrying his own books, leaving Vazix to trail behind him like a particularly sparkly lost puppy. Lady Nexara, who had once mocked Marcus's combat abilities, now offered daily demonstrations of plasma state techniques. "Your hidden talents are remarkable, Your Highness," she gushed, her form rippling with admiration. "Though, of course, you were clearly holding back during our previous encounters." "Actually," Marcus replied with that now legendary calm, "I really was that bad at first. Humans believe in learning from failure." The Quantum Physics Society, led by a thoroughly humbled Rivik Prime, frantically reprogrammed the molecular food synthesizer. Now it produced not just Earth delicacies, but quantum-enhanced versions that probably violated several laws of thermodynamics. "We have calculated the optimal flavor profiles for human taste buds," Rivik announced proudly, his quantum probability field practically vibrating with eagerness to please. Marcus took one bite and said, "I kind of miss the grass." But the real entertainment began when Marcus finally demonstrated his true capabilities. During an advanced temporal mechanics lecture, Professor Zelax's 9 heads were explaining a particularly complex theorem about cross-dimensional time loops. Actually, Marcus interrupted, casually sketching something in his primitive notebook. "There is a much simpler solution if you approach it from a human perspective." The equations he wrote out were so elegant that 3 of Professor Zelax's heads fainted. The remaining 6 spent the next hour arguing about how they had missed something so obvious. The fact that Marcus had developed this solution while supposedly struggling with basic quantum math caused several graduate students to question their life choices. Then came the combat training revelations. Remember his clumsy attempts at zero-G maneuvering? Turns out our human prince had been trained by the temporal guards themselves. When he finally displayed his full abilities, combining Earth martial arts with quantum combat techniques, even the combat AI requested a tutorial. "You mean you could have done this the whole time?" I asked him during one particularly spectacular demonstration. Marcus shrugged, executing a perfect temporal flip. "Mother always says that true power lies not in showing your strength, but in choosing when to reveal it." The diplomatic ramifications were even more amusing. Suddenly, every species that had ever made a disparaging remark about humans found themselves facing mysterious delays in their trade agreements. Planets that had dismissed Earth as a primitive backwater were now sending desperate messages about cultural exchange programs. The Titan clan actually petitioned to have their neural networks reprogrammed to better understand human humor. The Lumarians began offering courses in Earth history, their bioluminescent patterns forming images of famous human battles and innovations. Even the ancient archives AI started speaking with what it claimed was an authentic Earth accent. As the Academy's chief diplomatic officer, I found myself swamped with messages from various galactic powers, all desperate to explain how they had always held humanity in the highest regard. My facial ridges nearly cramped from maintaining a diplomatic expression during these obvious attempts at historical revision. The most delicious irony? Marcus continued to attend his classes with the same humble attitude, taking notes in his primitive notebook, asking questions when he did not understand something, and treating everyone exactly the same as before. It was just that now, the galaxy finally understood what humanity had known all along. Sometimes, the most powerful beings in the universe are the ones who do not need to prove it. Looking back on it all now, I cannot help but laugh at how spectacularly wrong we all were. Remember how we thought accepting a human student was lowering our prestigious standards? Now there is a waiting list of galactic royalty hoping to study alongside humans at the Academy. Prince Vazix, of all beings, became Marcus's most devoted ally. His crystalline form practically glows with pride when he tells anyone who will listen about how he helped train the human prince in combat. Convenient how he remembers those training sessions quite differently now. Though I must admit, watching him demonstrate his infamous gravity manipulation techniques to visiting human students does warm my diplomatic hearts. The key to understanding humans, he lectures anyone within earshot, is realizing that their apparent weaknesses are actually carefully disguised strengths. Lady Nexara and the Plasma Dominion established the first human plasma cultural exchange program. They even modified their combat training protocols to incorporate what they now call the human factor, the ability to succeed through adaptation rather than innate superiority. The sight of plasma beings attempting to use primitive Earth martial arts is something I will treasure in all my memory crystals. The Quantum Physics Society, led by an absolutely transformed Rivik Prime, now requires all members to spend at least one semester studying Earth history. How can we claim to understand quantum mechanics? Rivik argues, if we cannot understand how a species without natural quantum sensitivity managed to theorize its existence. But perhaps the most significant change came in the diplomatic sphere. As the Academy's chief diplomatic officer, I had the unique pleasure of watching various galactic powers scramble to update their official positions on human potential. The speed with which ancient treaties were revised to remove any reference to human primitiveness set a new record in galactic bureaucracy. The Titan clan actually proposed a constitutional amendment to their neural network, officially recognizing human intuition as an advanced form of quantum computing. The Lumarians commissioned a massive bioluminescent art piece depicting great moments in human history, though they are still arguing about whether to include Marcus's grass-eating month as a major historical event. Professor Zelax's 9 heads unanimously voted to create a new course, Human Problem-Solving Methodologies and Their Applications in Advanced Quantum Theory. The waiting list is longer than a quantum probability string. As for Marcus, our human prince completed his education with the same quiet determination he showed from day one. During his graduation ceremony, he gave a speech that I think perfectly captured the lesson we all learned. The greatest power in the universe, he said, standing before the assembled galactic dignitaries, is not the ability to manipulate quantum fields or shift between energy states or even to control time itself. It is the ability to learn from those who are different from you, to find strength in diversity, and to remember that appearances can be deceiving. The entire assembly gave him a standing ovation. Even the Academy's AI joined in, using the quantum field generators to create a simulation of applauding hands. Now, as I sit in my office, watching the latest batch of students arrive, a wonderfully diverse mix of species, including a record number of humans, I cannot help but reflect on how much has changed. The quantum corridors still sparkle with possibility, but now they ring with a different kind of energy. One that comes from knowing that true greatness can come in any form, from any species, from any background. Just yesterday, I overheard a crystalline student asking a human classmate for help with temporal mechanics. The human's response: "Sure, but first let me tell you about the time the Prince of the Galactic Throne spent a month eating synthesized grass." Some stories, it seems, only get better with time. And if you are wondering about my facial ridges, they never quite recovered from all the diplomatic contortions of that extraordinary semester. But every time I see them twitch in the mirror, I remember the most important lesson we learned. Never underestimate a human, especially one who smiles while eating grass.